FM 96.9 The Game. We're on the AM dial at AM 740. That's a 50,000-watt radio station. We're on the iHeart app worldwide. Our radio show is called The Finish Line. He is the Shot Doctor. I'm Jerry O'Neill. Glad to have you guys with us today. It's Tuesday of the week. Today's my wife's birthday. Happy birthday to Annie. And we have a first-time guest coming on with us. Yesterday, Steve Kyler from Basketball Insider. Steve has been a friend for 20 years, and I say there is no better basketball site, in my opinion, for NBA fans than Basketball Insiders. And a few weeks back, I was asking Steve for some information about other contacts he thought would be good guests on our show. And the next gentleman who joins us, who will be a first-time guest, was one of those. Now, David, pronounce your last name. Is it Yapkowitz?
It's Yapkowitz.
Yeah, good to have you with us. Where is home for you? Where do you live?
I'm out in Los Angeles, actually.
I thought so. Well, it's great to have you on with us today. We're very much looking forward to talking with you about some NBA basketball. We were kicking around a story. Actually, one of the biggest stories this summer, this season, this off-season, now that the NBA season came to a close on Friday night with Golden State's sweep of Cleveland, is the LeBron James story. And we were reading a story earlier today, and I don't know how credible it is, but that there were multiple stories over the last part of the basketball season and even since the end of the season about what LeBron James will do in this offseason. And then I saw a story attributed to Gary Payton, who told a reporter from Black Sports Online that LeBron's 13-year-old son, Bronny, is set to enroll at Sierra Canyon School in Los Angeles County. Do you know anything about that school?
Actually, I do. You know, I do cover the local high school basketball scene out here, and
right.
That's one of the teams that I do cover. They've been a pretty big basketball powerhouse for the past couple of years. Marvin Bagley, who's expected to be, you know, one of the top picks in the draft, actually went there for a year. So, you know, in terms of basketball, they're definitely one of the top schools out here.
I read that actually Scottie Pippen has a son, and Kenyon Martin, longtime NBA player, has a son that will play there. And again, go ahead.
Oh, they do, yeah. Scottie Pippen Jr. and Kenyon Martin Jr. both currently attend there. They also had last season Dwayne Washington Jr., who's actually the nephew of Derek Fisher.
Your thoughts. Do you think there's also conversation? I'm sure the Lakers would love to get back as a contender, as a relevant storyline in NBA basketball. Do you think they have a good chance of securing LeBron and maybe another key free agent this offseason?
Well, you know, one of the things they do have going for them is that they've got the cap space to sign him outright. So that's definitely working in their favor. They do have a good young nucleus in place. I think it's an enticing group, you know, if he does decide to come here. However, you know, one of the things I've always kind of grappled a little bit with is that, you know, if he does come to the Lakers, would they be able to take down Golden State? Because, you know, that's the cream of the crop out here. And, you know, I'm just not sure, even if they do manage to sign him and, say, another max player, would that be enough to take the Warriors down? And at this point in his career, you know, I think that's one of the most important things for him is where is going to give him the best chance to win.
Okay, let's go back to Cleveland right now, LeBron's present team. I guess the question, David, would be, what would the Cavaliers have to do around LeBron, personnel-wise, and salary cap-wise? They may be strapped with this, but in moves, do the Cavaliers have a chance to keep LeBron based on moves they can make to keep him happy in the East?
If you were to ask me maybe a few months ago or so, maybe when the playoffs started, I thought that maybe, you know, they'd have a decent shot at keeping him. Seeing as how this past series unfolded, I'm not so sure that he's going to stick around there. I do know, you know, that with him making this decision, you know, there's a lot of factors involved, one of which he's made clear is his children and his family in terms of schooling. But I also believe that, like I said, he does want to win championships at this point in his career.
Sure.
That's the main goal. And if he stays in Cleveland, I think sure, with given the pieces that they have, while a couple other teams, like Boston's on the come up, Philadelphia's got a nice young team there. They're still going to be the top team in the East, but getting to the finals and running into the Warriors like that, I'm not so sure that Cleveland anymore. That's the best place for him to be.
Okay, let's talk about. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Winning a championship is what he wants to do.
All right.
Yeah, Oklahoma City. Paul George is there right now. Was there this past year. Got traded there from Indiana. Of course, a free agent. Probably going to get a max contract from somebody. He's been linked to LeBron in L.A. and a few other places like that. I guess the first question is, are you convinced right now that Paul George will be out of Oklahoma City once free agency begins in about 3 weeks?
That I do believe. They came into the season, I would say, with championship aspirations, or at least aspirations of making a deep playoff run. Adding him, signing Russell Westbrook to the extension, and then bringing in Carmelo Anthony. But, it didn't quite work out that way, and they struggled throughout the season, and then they had the disappointing first-round exit against the Utah Jazz. So I'm a little bit more. I'm not quite sure exactly what these guys are going to do. But with Paul George, I think I'm a little more comfortable saying that, yeah, we probably have seen the last of him in OKC.
Chris Paul played alongside the Houston James Harden, is who I was trying to think of, and was injured and did not play in Game 7 of that series with Golden State. But yet he is also one of these guys. Chris Paul's a free agent at the end of this year. Can you imagine him leaving Houston?
That I can't. I was reading a report earlier, I think it was yesterday or so, saying that Houston's prepared to offer him a max contract. And seeing how close they came to actually knocking the Warriors off, I think he probably is coming back and, see if they can give it another run. It's not so much as, they need to add anybody. They had the Warriors on the ropes. And so, maybe the team that they have is good enough. And with a healthy Chris Paul, who knows what would have happened. So I think, in terms of Chris Paul staying in Houston, that's the best shot he's got right now at winning a title.
It's 5 o'clock in the East. We're WYGM Orlando, WJRR HD2 Cocoa Beach. Our show is called The Finish Line. Our guest is David Yapkowitz, NBA insider, NBA writer at Basketball Insiders. Obviously, here in Orlando for the 6th year in a row, we're more interested in the NBA draft because we have another lottery spot coming up. Do you think this is a talented field of players that we're going to look at year one, starting with the draft 9 days down the road?
I think there's a few players up at the top, that are projected to be, top 5 or so picks that look like they can really be difference makers at that next level. I think, one of them right away is DeAndre Ayton. The guy is a physical specimen. He's a legit 7-footer. He's got an improving outside game, mobile. He's agile. That's definitely a guy I see making an impact at the next level. And somebody like Marvin Bagley as well. I think he's a very versatile big man. He can score in the paint. He can put the ball on the floor. He can shoot from the outside. I think he's going to be a difference maker at that next level too. And then you got a couple other guys, that a lot of people are kind of high on Luka Doncic. I think he's got some good size. He's 6'8", what is it, like 220 or so? That's pretty good size for a guard. I think he has a chance to be a decent player. And there's a few others too. I've seen, Trae Young is another guy. One guy that seems to be climbing up on the draft boards a little bit is Mo Bamba. He's another kind of versatile big man working on his outside game. He kind of projects to be, I think, an elite defender in the paint in the NBA. So I think you've got a few guys up at the top there that could possibly end up being key pieces, not just key pieces, but maybe even a star for some teams out there.
You know, David, before the season began, before the college basketball season began, Michael Porter Jr. in the mock drafts was going first overall. No question about that. Then he had the back injury, and he had the surgery, and he played about 50 minutes the whole year. And he's healthy right now. He went to the combine and came out of it pretty good. He's worked out for teams. So far, so good. And right now, when the Magic pick at number 6, I think there's a better than 50% chance he's going to be there. So talk about him and how his game translates to the NBA as long as he stays healthy the way he is right now.
Well, you know, coming into college as a senior in high school, Michael Porter Jr. was the top-ranked player in his class and definitely projected to be an impact-level guy at the NBA level. Unfortunately, you know, due to injury, we didn't quite get to see him in college. College, you know, isn't always the best indicator or the best predictor of NBA success, but you know, he's still a little bit of a question mark, I think, just because we didn't see him play, you know, in college, how his game translated to that level. But there's no question that, you know, he's a talented prospect. He's definitely, you know, if healthy, I think, you know, he'd be in the conversation there as possibly, you know, top 1, 2, 3 picks or so. And so, you know, depending on his health and depending, you know, on what teams think about, you know, his prognosis injury-wise, I think, you know, you might see him slip a little bit, maybe out of the top 5, but I think whoever does pick him up, provided that he's healthy, they're going to get one amazing player, possibly, you know, again, a star-type guy.
So the Clippers go picks 12 and 13. That's their own pick, and the pick they got in Detroit involving the Blake Griffin trade. So 12 and 13 in this draft, back-to-back. I want you to talk about those picks right now and how appealing that might be to a team picking, say, in the top 10, going 12 and 13 instead via trade.
If they end up keeping those picks, was that?
Yeah. Right.
You know, I think they're in a good position. They're a team that, you know, even though they didn't make the playoffs, I think maybe they overachieved a little bit. Just because, you know, with the trade with Blake Griffin and the major injuries that hit the team, Doc Rivers really had a great coaching year and really got a lot out of the young guys that are on the team. And when you get to add potential lottery picks, you know, such as the opportunity they have this draft, I think that only is going to strengthen their team a bit. Every year, there's always guys that are projected to go certain spots, and they end up slipping a little bit. And I think, you know, where the Clippers are positioned to pick, they might be the beneficiary of something like that. You know, maybe a couple guys or a guy or two that was projected to go near the top slips a little bit and falls right in the Clippers' lap. So I think they're actually in a pretty good position with those picks, you know, to continue to add to the nucleus that they've got in place currently.
Our guest is David Yapkowitz. He's out in California, writes at basketballinsiders.com. And I'm really interested in your conversation with us regarding this next issue, because you follow a lot of youth basketball, high school basketball. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, so I want to ask, last year in the NBA draft, of course, there are 2 rounds, 60 players drafted. As I understand it, there are like 135 underclassmen who have made themselves eligible for the draft. Obviously, with only 60 players chosen, and not all of them by any means will be underclassmen. That doesn't even include the foreign players who are coming to try to make it into the NBA. Last year, there were 16 freshmen in the first round, 18 overall. I'm a fan of one and done, and I know that there's an awful lot of pressure on this commissioner to get rid of that in a new collective bargaining agreement, or maybe even in advance of the agreement expiring. There's pressure because of the FBI report, and then the NCAA itself commissioned a study that Condoleezza Rice was kind of the point person on. I like the one and done because I think as a college basketball fan, it allows us to see these high school top talent play a year of high-level college basketball and then can move on to the NBA. First-round picks, guaranteed money is good money, etc. But there seems to be all this pressure on the commissioner and on the league, and it's coming from multiple sources, colleges, players, etc. that is going to change that to allow high school kids to be drafted again. As it regards the NBA, are you for that?
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't have a problem with it. If that's, I think, it should probably be left up to them. If, there are players, and not every player, is going to be good enough to go straight to the NBA. But, for players that are thinking of making that leap, that are thinking, hey, maybe college is not for me, this is really what I want to do, then, yeah, I think, they probably should have that decision to be able to go straight to the NBA. And just recently, there are a few high school camps that have been going on in the summer where NBA personnel have been credentialed to attend these camps. I was at one a couple weekends ago out in Cerritos. It's the Pangos All-American Camp. And it was the first time in that event's history that NBA scouts and NBA personnel were credentialed to attend the event. So, there's been a few rumblings of, the NBA perhaps getting rid of the one-and-done rule and opening up the draft to high schoolers again, even as early as the 2020 draft. So, it's interesting to see because, as you said, there were a bunch of underclassmen that declared for the draft this year. Yeah. And if you open it up then again to high schoolers as well, it's interesting to think about how that would factor into the draft if you've got a bunch more players that are now eligible to be drafted.
All right, so let's look down the road in 5 years, in your opinion. Where do you think the NBA will be with that situation? I'm talking about, will we expand the draft to more than 2 rounds? What do you think the G League will look like in 5 years? I mean, to me, I think there probably will be this large group of young basketball talent that think that they're all going to be NBA players, when obviously that's just not the case. There are only so many jobs, and so many of those are already being held by guys in the league. And the big dollars are associated with pretty much first-round draft picks, aren't they?
Yeah, that's true. I think if I were to take a stab at, 5 years from now, where would we look at what would the landscape look like in terms of the draft? I'd say that, the G League, it's really starting to become more of a minor league system for the NBA. When it initially started out, it wasn't quite, what they intended it to be. But I think over the past few years, especially this year, it's definitely grown. And I think it's definitely in the years to come, it's probably going to become a place where perhaps young players will be able to go there. They'll be able to make money right away out of high school. Maybe, they're not as talented, or they're not able to, they're not as good. They won't be good enough to get to the NBA right away, but this is a good starting out place for them. They'd be able to be around NBA personnel and things like that. So I would say, probably in 5 years that, yeah, the NBA is probably going to open up the draft to high schoolers again, but you're also going to see the G League really start to take off and really start to be that system.
It'll be most interesting to follow, obviously, these steps, and I think you're right to a large degree, all these changes that are coming. It'll be interesting to see in 5 years how that road has moved in the landscape of NBA basketball and youth basketball, how it collides. David, nice to have you on with us. We very much appreciate your insights. We'll look forward to continue to read your work and others at Basketball Insiders. Thank you.
Great. Yes, great. Thank you for having me.
David Yapkowitz, will have him back from time to time. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Basketball Insiders guys are really good, by the way.